Hello all of you wonderful people, Jules here for WhatCulture.com, and I'm here speaking to you from the void of the internet today about video game bosses. It's a subject that I find truly fascinating. From their conception to their varied delivery, video game bosses can reflect the best and the worst of video game design. They can be amazing, memorable moments, and they can be absolute slogs that make you want to burn the very console they're on to the ground. The bosses that we're going to be talking about today, though, kind of fall into both categories, as while they can be fun to play against, they take bloody ages to see off. If you're thinking of popping down the shops, you better do it before you start any of these battles, as you ain't going anywhere for a long old while, pal. I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video game bosses that take absolutely ages to beat. Number 10. MAEL RADEC, KILLZONE 2. So, the final boss in KILLZONE 2 is an infuriating slog for several reasons. First and foremost, even getting to RADEC requires you to spend ages clearing out the endless fleet of Hellghast that guard the palace that he's in, all of which have been shopping at the explosive store during a sale because they've got boom to spare. The difficulty spike is sharp enough to impale yourself on, and trying to get through this section on the higher difficulty is like watching an Ash Millman video, an exercise in frustration. But let's just say you've done it. Let's just say you've gotten to the big old bad boy. Well, I hope you brought a packed lunch, as you're going to be here all day watching him teleport around, disappear thanks to his cloaking tech, and then reappear right up in your face to stab you in it. It's a boss fight so exhausting and morale draining that it feels very artificially inflated. However, finally beating him is something of an achievement by itself. Number 9. Bed of Chaos, Dark Souls. Now here's the thing, I've spoken about the Bed of Chaos many times before and how I think it's an unnecessary Dark Souls boss that, while being easy when you know what to do, is a frustrating example of pattern learning that simply punishes those who make even the slightest missteps. Lore-wise, it's brilliant. Gameplay-wise, it's hot garbage. Rather than hacking away at a health bar as per usual, this boss asks the player to attack 3 energy nodes attached to a gigantic plant-like thing. And it's here where the Souls series' signature stern but fair approach goes out the bloody window, as the Bed of Chaos basically forces player to roll them bones and hope for the best. Making matters worse is that unless you've unlocked the bonfire nearby, which is secret by the way, you'll need to make a hefty sprint back to the Bed of Chaos every time you die, which you will do at first a lot. And finally, if you think I'm complaining about not being good enough, then just remember Miyazaki himself called this boss his greatest regret. Number 8. Senator Armstrong, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. As a series, Metal Gear knows how to do brilliant bosses. However, that doesn't mean that these guys and girls are pushovers, no sirree, and in fact will test the player's skill to unrivaled heights. One need look for no better example of this than Senator Armstrong in Metal Gear Revengeance, who is, in short, an absurd fight on every level. His attacks hit harder than your parents telling you they're getting a divorce, he moves faster than me on the dance floor after the party powder has kicked in, and he deflects more than Josh if you try to touch his hair. If you can make it through the 3 challenging phases of this fight and survive the QTE sections that are thrown up here and there, then you're still looking at a battle that can take over an hour to do. Now mercifully, there are checkpoints, but seriously, this is a contest of strength that will take all you have and then some. Number 7. Nick's Avatar, Persona 3. If most of the bosses on this list are made longer by their punishing difficulty, that's not really the case with Persona 3's final boss, Nick's Avatar. To most moderately skilled players, Nick's isn't actually too much of a challenge, but the fight sure does take ages. Almost 2 hours in fact. This boss has a staggering 14 forms which must be defeated, and its final form is able to charm your party members into fully healing it, setting you back heaps of time. Oh, and if you die, you'll have to start the entire fight again because the Persona franchise's approach to checkpointing at this point in the series sucked. I think the biggest crime here is that it's not that hard, but it's so incredibly long that players will become frustrated at having to slog through this absolute tick box of aggravating boss designs. Number 6. The End, Metal Gear 3 Snake Eater. The End is arguably the greatest boss in the Metal Gear franchise, and certainly the most innovative. The End is a legendary old sniper who doesn't actually seek to kill Naked Snake. He fires tranquilizer darts at the player, enough of which will cause Snake to be returned to jail, forcing the encounter to start again. Now, I love how this boss catches you off guard the first time you encounter him, and even if you do manage to avoid being tranquilized, you are in for a rough time ahead if you've not picked up those thermal goggles. However, there are a few workarounds. I mean, you can snipe him earlier on in the game, or you could just put your console internal clock ahead a week and make him die of old age. Yet if you've not been in the know about these factors, then this epic fight will make sure that you will wish for an end to the end. Number 5. YIAZMAT, Final Fantasy XII. Final Fantasy XII's thankfully optional super boss YIAZMAT rocks a mind-melting 50,112,254 HP, and that can take anywhere from 1 to 4 hours for most players to defeat. It also possesses a small chance of casting an insta-kill spell, and if you can avoid a counter of that, as another caveat, you also can't do more than 6,999 damage a hit when its health drops below 50%. That just seems incredibly unfair. Even though players are allowed to save mid-fight, it comes at the possible cost of allowing the boss to restore a large chunk of his health, potentially wasting a ton of time in the process. Ultimately, this is an example of a boss that, much like me when I have to muster a chub for your mother, was long and artificially hard without actually being very fun. I'm sorry lads, she doesn't move around very much because of her hip, what can I say? Luckily, the boss fight was nerfed with the release of the Zodiac Age, but still, the damage had already been done. And yes, that was my one per list. Number 4. King K. Rool, Donkey Kong 64. Don't let this boss's silly appearance fool you. The final battle against King K. Rool and Donkey Kong 64 is a soul-destroying exercise in player perseverance. The fight is a 5-round boxing match between K. Rool and the various Kongs, and though each of the rounds sees a Kong fighting him in a different way, the sheer number of constraints placed upon the player makes it one hell of an uphill battle. Now don't get me wrong, this is one of the most memorable moments in all of DK64, but that doesn't mean it's not an absolute challenge. For example, if you don't manage to drain K. Rool's health in 2.5 minutes, his health will regenerate where yours does not. Plus, if you fail to beat K. Rool within 12 rounds, then everything will start again. Even though the boss in theory will only take you around 20 minutes, doing this perfectly first time is reserved for speedrunners and those that basically coded the bloody game. Oh, and there's a difficulty spike that will make you think that this game was suddenly swapped for Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. So yeah, have fun with that. Number 3. Final Fantasy VII Emerald Weapon. Now, in fairness, this is an entirely optional boss, and you don't have to subject yourself to the misery that is most people's first encounter with Emerald Weapon. The boss is a level 99 enemy with a staggering 1 million HP, and unless you've equipped the underwater materia, you'll be stuck with a brutal 20-minute time limit, which will result in many failures. Even without the ticking clock though, this fight is still an epically long war of attrition as you try to withstand Emerald's HP annihilating attacks. Now true, if your party is skilled and has figured out how to manipulate certain attacks and materia, you'll be fine, but trust me, the general public is nowhere near this level on their first playthrough. Number 2. Henry COOLDOWN, No More Heroes. No More Heroes has some of the coolest, most strange and downright demented bosses for any game that I've yet played, but there is one above all others who will push you to your breaking point if you are foolish enough to try and cross him on the bitter difficulty setting. Now normally, boss fights will last around about 10 minutes or so maximum, but here, well, Henry will withstand about 1,000 hits, and when you can only land a few hits on him at a time, well, you're in for a long ride. Making this even more of a chore is the fact that he has an insta-death one-hit kill move, which, trust me, you're going to hate the animation of when you've seen it 30 or so times. If you can make it through this barrage of bullshit, then you really do deserve a pat on the back, and probably to go eat because you're likely starving to death. And number 1, Pandemonium Warden, Final Fantasy XI. Wow, just wow. How did anyone think that the boss battle that took 18 hours straight would be a good idea? I get that you want to make a statement that Pandemonium Warden is pretty much the be-all and end-all of bosses in Final Fantasy XI, but come on, 18 hours? Oh, and just for the record, that 18-hour time was one where the group facing him still didn't win and had to quit out because members were feeling physically ill. After the backlash from this fight, Square Enix dropped the difficulty down a fair bit, imposing an easier fight, but also with it a 2-hour time limit, which would still ruin most people's success chances. One of the first recorded instances of its defeat only managed to get through its 10 different forms with only 5 minutes left on the clock, meaning that even when easier, this Warden was a drain on anyone's time. And there we go, those were 10 video game bosses that take absolutely ages to beat. Let me know down in the comments section below your choices, as I might do a commenters edition later on down the line. But before you go, my friends, and enjoy your day, I just wanted to say something. There is a boss within us all that can sometimes feel like it's being very unfair, and that can be our brain. Make sure you're speaking to people if you've got problems, alright? Trust me, people care more than you realise. And if you want to chat about this or anything else, you can do so at RetroJ with a 0 over on Twitter. As always, I've been Jules, you have been awesome, never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye!